Do we think of this sweater? Come on. If you know, you know. If you get it, you get it. Come on. It is that time of year again. I'm so excited for this season. I feel like this summer has been a long one for so many of us. It has been really hot. I want all of the fall vibes. I want the cold weather. I want the warm drinks. I want the sweaters. And of course, I want books that remind me of fall. A small town romance, something a little creepy, something a little spooky. I want all of those feelings. I think the books in this video are going to be perfect for that. Buckle up, have your drink at hand, because we are going to talk about a lot of books in this video, so apologies in advance, but I have so many recommendations that I just want to go through in this video, and I couldn't leave them out. We're going to be covering all of our bases: romance, fantasy, mystery thrillers. We're talking about them all. I'm going to be talking about them by genre. We're going to start with romance, and we're just going to get right into it. First book we're going to talk about is one of my all-time favorites. I read this on Kindle, had to buy the physical copy because I do plan on rereading this. I wanted it on my bookshelf, and that is All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. You've heard me talk about this book many a time. It is chunky.
She is thick with two C's.
However, this gives all of the warm small town romance fall vibes that you could ask for. We have a girl that goes back to a town that she grew up in with her mom in order to kind of solve this mystery that she has with her mom because she went missing when she was young. She finds herself booking an Airbnb. The Airbnb host is not entirely happy that she's there. So we have a grumpy sunshine trope, we have a small town romance, we have a little mystery, we have a town where everyone knows everyone and everyone's really kind and nice, very genuine people. So it's also giving Gilmore Girls. This is also a slow burn romance. So throughout the book, the majority of this book, we've got a lot of banter, a lot of bickering, a lot of like that hand flex, you know? I love it. It just, the anticipation for them to finally get together is real. And I cannot recommend this book enough for fall. Another book that reminds me of Gilmore Girls a little bit is When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This book is so cute and cozy. We have a baker and a pop star in this small town, and everyone knows everyone. Everyone is so nice. They're kind of all up in your business, but in a good way, kind of. And it's so cute. The guy, our main character, Noah, is such a sweet, gentlemanly, small town guy. So a lot of he's very traditional in certain respects. And then we have this girl from the city. She's a pop star, and she's kind of stuck in this town. I definitely recommend you read this for fall because the fact that he's a bake shop owner and he bakes pies and stuff, puts you in the mood to have all of the pies. Read this book on a nice cold, chilly fall day. Come on. Another book by Mariana Zapata. I don't have the physical copy, but I wanted to put it in here because if you're a fan of sports and like sports seasons, then I think you'll like this book by her. It's The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, and it is a sports romance, like sports romance, and he is obviously the football player and she is his assistant, and it's like an arranged marriage type of thing. So good. We have forced proximity, grumpy sunshine again, slow burn, like a mega slow burn because of the fall season, and it's normally like the beginning of Friday night football or Sunday night football or whatever it's called.
I'm not a sports fan,
but you get it if you're interested in sports and football and all of that. I think you'll really enjoy this book because it talks about his games and things like that. So it's really cute, and I think you'll really enjoy it as well for the fall season. Which brings me to my next book, which is a classic, but I had to put it in here. That is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I feel like not many people talk about this particular book, and I get it. It's gonna have more of this gothic elements in it because of the home where our main character goes. She is in Bath for the social season, and she gets invited by some people that she meets to Northanger Abbey, and she stays there for a few weeks or something. But the house is kind of creepy. The father of this home, he's not like a real gentleman, not a really nice man, but I still think this is a really nice story for fall because of the gothic vibes and the elements It's gonna make it a little creepy, but you're still gonna have mostly romance. And this is a classic. I think everyone should read Jane Austen. So if you haven't yet for fall, go ahead and give this one a try. And then I also wanted to mention A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons. I love this book so much. Kate Cavari is, I think, a newer author. I haven't really heard of her before finding this book, but now that I have discovered her, I'm so happy that I did. She writes very well. This is an historical fiction / mystery / romance. Our main character, Saffron, is a research assistant at the university. She is a botanist, obviously, and someone is accusing her professor, like her main boss, of attempted murder. And so she's basically trying to solve this case by herself, and she receives help by kind of an academic rival. And she is not necessarily socially awkward, but she's so studious and focused on her work and this case that she doesn't realize that her and this person have a lot in common. And they have really cute banter. I love this book. It's also set in the Roaring 20s, so there's really good imagery in here for the setting and how they're dressed, and it reminds me a little bit of The Great Gatsby. I think that this is a great, cute little short romance to read during this season. Plus, with the mystery element in there, you just can't go wrong with this book. And then the last book that I have for my romance recommendations is Powerless by Elsie Silver. This is, I think, book 3 in the Chestnut Spring series. I have read almost all of them, but this one's my favorite, and it just so happens to work for this video because we have a hockey player, so this is another sports romance, and his best friend that he grew up with. She chooses to forego her engagement with some hotshot man in the city. She runs away with her friend Jasper, who she's been friends with her whole life. They very slowly start to realize that they're more than just friends, and they've loved each other their whole life. It does have some changing of seasons in there as well, so you're gonna get a little bit of a transition from fall to winter. You're gonna have sports, you're gonna have slow burn, you're gonna have friends to lovers, and it is so cute. I love Jasper's story. This is the best book in the Chestnut Spring series. If you haven't read it, go ahead and read it. It is so good. Yeah. Moving right along to fantasy books. The fall and winter months are the best time to read fantasies. They're very atmospheric, very whimsical, enchanting, and I love reading them during the cozier months of the year. So it was really hard to choose books for this section, but I've narrowed it down 6 books, so bear with me. The first book I want to talk about is more magical realism than anything, but it is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book I don't see talked about too much, but it was popular a couple of years ago. This is a story of 2 young magicians, Celia and Marco, and they have been training their entire lives for this competition to kind of see who is the best of the best magician. They've been trained by 2 mentors separately, and it's essentially a battle between these 2 mentors, but their magicians that they're training are kind of collateral damage in this story. It's very atmospheric. It's not very plot heavy. It's more character driven. While I think that the ending isn't necessarily a impactful, super crazy angsty climax, the overall purpose for this book is to just be in the atmosphere, be in the setting, feel what the characters are feeling, get a sense for the magnificence of this really mysterious but enchanting circus that just pops up randomly in different places, as well as the magic system. We don't really understand it too much, but again, it's not so much about understanding the magic system in this book as it is about just being in the moment with these characters. Romantic, it is enchanting, and who doesn't love a good circus story? Another circus book that I wanted to bring up in here is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is, I don't want to say it's a prequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart because I don't necessarily think you need to read this series before getting into that series. However, I wanted to recommend this book for fall because, again, we have this magical, enchanted kind of pop-up circus that just appears randomly. I don't even think it's a circus. It's more of this weird carnival that takes place amongst an entire town. We have a game master. His name is Legend in this book, and he has this ability to transform an entire town into his game. And if you want to beat the game, you have to be invited, or you can just go find out where it is, go try to beat it. It's always not what you think. The rules are always changing. And our main characters are two sisters, Scarlett and Donatella. They essentially leave their father, who's like super abusive, to go to Caraval. And while they're there, Donatella goes missing, so Scarlett is on a mission to find her sister. It goes from there. This is book 1 of 3, so we're gonna have a lot of romance, a lot of magic, a lot of fantasy elements, a sisterly bond, morally gray characters, tons of moving parts, but I love this series a lot. While I do think that the Once Upon a Broken Heart series is still my personal favorite and better than this one, I do think it's worth reading a million times over. And if you are a fan of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series and you love Jax, he is in this series as well. He comes in, I think, in book 2 and 3, not necessarily book 1, but I still think you should read this book. It is so good. Recommend it to everybody. Going to something a little more creepy, had to put it in there, but I do think it's still categorized as a fantasy. That is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. I love this book so much. This is a 5-star read for me. I have not read a book yet from her that I don't think I have. I want to say I've given all of her books so far a 5-star rating. She just came out with a new book, but for right now, definitely read this book. One, it's yellowy, orange, and gold. Reminds me of fall so much.
This is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling.
Our main character, Ellery, in a very small village, isolated from everybody and civilization, really. We have this forest surrounding the village that is kind of spooky, and they don't really leave the village. When you leave the village, you go with a whole army of people in order to, get more supplies and barter and trade and things like that. Some things are going down in this forest and people are dying, people are disappearing. A mysterious guy comes into town and they don't really know what's up with him. There's a lot of kind of this village mob mentality that goes on with this book, which makes it really creepy, along with the monsters and the whisperings that are going on in this village and in the forest. If you've read or know of the story of Rumpelstiltskin, you know that when you ask for something from Rumpelstiltskin, it comes with a price, and that is exactly what happens in this book. Highly recommend if you are in the mood for a fantasy book that's gonna give you a little bit of sinister vibes, something a little creepy, a little spooky, nothing too crazy, but just enough to kind of scratch the itch, but also give you kind of a romantic subplot. Make it make sense. I don't know, but it's in this book. There is a romantic subplot in here, and it's really cute. I like it. I love it a lot. Again, I've given this book a 5-star rating, and I should reread this book because it is just so good. Things go from bad to worse in this book, and yeah, it's so good. I wanted to give one more retelling in here because why not? Darling Girl by Liz Michalski. This is a Peter Pan retelling. It is so atmospheric, whimsical. It's going to give you Peter Pan in a very dark light. He is the villain in this book. I'm not really going to say too much more than that, other than if you've watched the cartoon growing up and you always thought Peter Pan was kind of weird, definitely read this book. If you loved Peter Pan and you're like, no, he could never do wrong, I still think you should read this book because it just
gives it something a little extra. Gives it a little extra spice.
Our main character is Holly Darling. She's the granddaughter of Wendy from Peter Pan and Wendy. And her daughter had an accident growing up when she was like young. So her daughter is now in the care in this like facility overseas, and she goes missing one day. So she books it over to England in order to find her daughter, and there's something going on with Peter and her past, and it is so good. We also have Hook show up in here, so that's fun. I wanted to put this in my fall recommendations video specifically because the animation of Peter Pan is a little more atmospheric than the other Disney movies, and the fact that we have a reimagining of this and it being a little more sinister and dark, I think is perfect for this time of year. Also, the cover I think looks really cool for the fall season. We've got like this orangey black going on with the cover. Definitely recommend. Haven't really seen anyone talk about it, but it is worth reading if you're interested in fairy tale Disney reimaginings. A recent read of mine that I definitely think is worth reading in the fall, if you haven't already, is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is my Owl Created edition and it is stunning. This book is so perfect for the fall season, I think, because of the setting. More than anything, we have a setting. It's like a historical fiction, but it's a fantasy world. So I guess urban fantasy, but it's not really tropey like in urban fantasy, so we're not gonna have modern slang. The only similarities to our modern world are that our main character is working at this newspaper. She writes for like the obituaries, and she has a typewriter, and she writes letters to her brother that's off in war, but he's not receiving the letters. Someone else is receiving the letters, and he writes her back through like some enchantment that's going on in her wardrobe. So they write letters back and forth. They're like pen pals. It is so sweet. It reminds me of You've Got Mail, which also kind of takes place in the fall and winter months. So perfect. So yeah, it's romantic, it's sad. We deal with academic or rivals to lovers. We have loss, the struggles of having to deal with someone that you know and love that's in war and in battle. It's a beautiful story. Book 2 is coming out at the end of this year, and I think you will really love it during the fall months. So if you want something to make you teary-eyed, break your heart just a little bit, and still make you feel really warm and fuzzy inside, then definitely pick this up. And then the last fantasy book I have for this video that I have to mention, I don't have the physical copy. I need to because I love this book so much. It is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V. Schwab. I feel like any of her books, you can't go wrong with them during the fall months because they all are kind of sinister and dark. But this book specifically touches on themes that I think you will really enjoy if you're looking for something more atmospheric as well as sinister and dark and just a little bit romantic. We have a girl that grew up in 1700s in France, and she doesn't want to go through with this arranged marriage, and so she does what her parents told her never to do, which was to pray to the gods at night because you never know who's listening, kind of thing. Essentially, what happens to her is she is given immortality at like a very dire cost. So what happens is when she encounters someone and has interactions with them, as soon as she leaves their line of sight, they forget about her. So she's essentially invisible for all intents and purposes. She goes through centuries of just trying to survive because no one can remember who she is. So she lives her life alone for a long time. There's so much more to the story than that, but that's just the gist. I think you will really enjoy it if you're looking for something that's going to give some magical realism elements, fantastical elements. It's going to be very atmospheric. You're going to see a setting of France. You're going to see a setting of New York City, or I think a city in the United States. And it's going to be touching on some questions that are just going to make you think a little bit. So I highly recommend this book. Of all of V.E. Schwab's books, this is the top recommendation I'd have for you for the fall months. Now we're going to get into mystery thrillers. I only have 3 book recommendations for this genre. But that's okay. I don't really read too much of this genre. I feel like I did, but for this video, I don't really have too many recommendations that give me the fall vibes. I'm just gonna shoot my shot. The first one that I think is just a classic, in my opinion. I love this book. I loved the movie. It's twisty, it's dark, it's sinister, and I don't necessarily think it takes place in fall, but the way this story is set up with the back and forth, he said, she said thing is just, I love it so much, and something about it thinks it's something I should read in the fall months, and you should too. And that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This book is
messed up.
Thinking because there's so many twists and turns. There's a guessing game, there's riddles. It has everything you could need in a thriller of 2 characters that are just really bad people. Not necessarily one person doing something inherently wrong to the other person, or normal thriller would be, I guess. We have just really messed up people that are married to each other that do horrible things to each other. This is a he said, she said, POV, so it's still a POV, and we have Amy and Nick Dunn. Nick is in the present day, and then we have Amy's diary, which is past tense, so it's what led up to the events of Nick's perspective, if that makes sense. So it goes back and forth between timelines and between POVs. The plot twist at the end, I absolutely loved. And like I said, this is kind of a classic now. This is older, but she's a goodie. She has stood the test of time. It's definitely worth reading. And if you are interested in the movie as well, highly recommend. Ben Affleck stars as well as Rosamund Pike. Flawless, the both of them. Highly recommend both movie and book. Then we have Agatha Christie's like Mrs. Marple's 12 New Mysteries. This is written by various authors as like a testament to Agatha Christie. And they are essentially a collection of short stories with Mrs. Marple, you know, the famous detective in Agatha Christie's novels, as the main character in all of these short stories. I have read a few of them so far and they're really good. I love the take that these authors took with Mrs. Marple. It's fun, they're cozy mysteries, nothing too crazy as Agatha Christie's books were so old. They aren't as high stakes as I feel like thrillers can be or are nowadays. So they're just nice cozy mysteries to read, and they're really short because they're novellas and they're short stories. So you can fly through these, you can read them throughout the fall, winter months easily, but they're nice. And if you are a fan of Agatha Christie, definitely worth checking out this book. I wanted to give it some hype because I don't really see too many people talking about it, but it should be talked about more. And then finally, we have reached the end of this video. I have one more recommendation. I read this a few years ago and it's just stuck with me. It was really good. I'm a huge fan of Lisa Jewell. She is probably one of my favorite thriller authors. I love her plot twists at the end and how she writes her characters. I think it's a good amount of a book being character driven and plot driven at the same time. She does a good job. The Family Upstairs is a story about a girl who basically receives an inheritance of an abandoned house. And so she goes to this house of this family that she knows nothing about. Because she was adopted, she doesn't know too much about her birth parents or their story. So when she goes to this abandoned house, she finds out a lot about herself that is pretty crazy. And she also discovers that other people have been waiting for her to show up at this house
for like 25 years.
So there's so much happening, a lot of twists and turns, crazy family dynamic. We have part of the story, which this is not a spoiler by the way, but part of the story starts with 25 years ago in the past in this house. Police were called to reports of a baby crying. And so when they arrive at this house, they find the baby alone in their crib, just crying by themselves. And then downstairs in the kitchen are like 3 dead people. They're all dressed in black. There's a note next to one of them. And the 4 other children that were reported to have lived at the same property were nowhere to be found. It is super suspenseful, dark. We go in, again, dual timelines with this book. So you're gonna get a then and now perspective. And like I said, the twists and turns, you will never guess. The plot twist at the end, amazing. I loved it. This is probably my favorite book by her. It was so good. And yeah, I think if you're interested in something that's a little more character driven, you're gonna learn a lot about family dynamics, definitely read this book. It is twisted, and I think it'll get you in the feels for something a little creepy, a little sinister for the fall season. I think also because this is supposed to be like a goody two-shoes neighborhood, small town, and this tragedy or event really ruffled the feathers of everyone involved in this area. It makes it more small town vibey, maybe, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, all of the books that I have for you for this 2023 fall book rec video. I think I've given you a little bit of everything. We've got small town romance, we've got fantasy, we've got tale adaptations, crazy families. I mean, what more can you ask for?
I feel like I have rambled on long enough in this video.
So let me know in the comments what you think. If there are any other book recommendations, let me know. I would love to check them out. And if you're looking for other book recs, go ahead and watch these videos right here. But until next time, I'll catch you in my next video. Mwah. Bye.